it's maybe in a way easier to join from the outside and to be known as the head of that team than to be part of the team and then to be promoted. And then to have, even if your management style is very relaxed and you get on well with your team, but to have the difficult conversations when you need to is more difficult when you are part of the team as opposed to when you came from the outside. So in the next 40 minutes, I want to get to some practical things. A few of you in the break told me that it feels like I'm speaking to you about your world. It's so good to know. Hopefully some of you feel like that. Does it ring a bell? Okay, that's always good. Otherwise, it's such a great, fantastic theoretical conversation, and you walk out of here and you say there's no practical application. That's not what we want. Okay. I want to teach you from the little bit that I've learned, and there's most likely a lot that you can also teach me. And we need to learn from each other, and that's why I like these events, to network. Firstly, to realize that we all deal with, to a large extent, the same kind of issues. Because it's easy to start feeling like you're isolated, maybe there's something wrong with you, maybe it's just your problem. And then you speak to somebody from another organization and you realize 80% of the issues you share in common. And then you try and learn from each other. All right. So, there's Annie again, doing the heavy lifting. I want to get into a few practical issues. So let's just reiterate. Annie got the job. She's now head of testing, head of QA, exec, or whatever you want to call it. Imagine yourself in that position. Some of you might be in that position now. You're the head of testing for your organization or within the division in your organization, like in a bank. Maybe you are in retail banking and you head up their testing team, but there might be a testing team in corporate and investment banking. Whatever the scenario, you can be a manager of a team of 5 people, or you could manage a whole division of 300 people. I think some of the principles I'm going to share here will hopefully apply to all those situations. So again, you might already be the leader of a team. Hopefully you can apply some of this. Or you might be have the ambition to become the leader of the team, head of testing. And then where do you start? So now imagine Annie. She just walked out of her boss's office and he said, congratulations, let's shake hands. You're the head of testing. And he also tells her that testing doesn't work. You take too long. You cost us too much money. I don't even know why we need testing, because developers say they can do all the testing. And this company from India said they can do all the testing at a quarter of the price. So now you need to manage your boss's expectations. So one of the first things in any job, not just in this scenario, is find out what is important to your boss. Find out what he or she is measured on. Because what you need to deliver will be a subset of what he or she needs to deliver. Does that make sense? So what is your boss's KPI, key performance indicators? What is he or she measured on? And you know how many times we get a new job and we never ask our boss that question? What is important to you, Mr. Boss, Madam Boss, or whatever? See that gender inclusivity I've just done there? I've worked mostly for women all my life, and I like it a lot more than working for guys, by the way. Okay, so gender inclusivity. But find out what is important. How will you be measured? How will you know I've been successful? This is a good little sentence to write down. And I'll say it 3 times. We will know we have been successful when, ... I will know I have been successful when. We will know we have been successful when. That answer to that question is key for you to get from your boss and your boss's peers, maybe your boss's boss if you have some sort of a relationship there. But what is the thing I need to do for you to see me as being successful? Because you can end up doing a lot of really good things. Changing your team. Maybe a lot of them are demotivated, now they're excited. Maybe they are doing things too slow, now they're doing it faster. You could really go home at night thinking, I'm doing a great job. But in the eyes of your boss, or your manager, or your exec, the person who's going to measure you, are you successful? You might also find that the thing or the things that your boss say is important to him or to her is a little stupid. Like, why are you worried about that? But you can't discard it. Maybe you can still fix all the other things that you know you need to fix. But don't forget, it all comes down to what are you measured on. So in any job, but now in this scenario with Annie, that's one of the first things you need to find out. Sometimes your boss won't be able to articulate that. He might just say, listen, the place is just a mess, fix it please. And that's your mandate. That's difficult, because how does he or she measure it being a mess? Because also remember, as the higher you go up in an organization, the more there are what I call bullshit filters. The real problems don't get to the top, because we're all covering our asses, everyone. They only hear the great stories and how great everything is. And when they hear one complaint, so they hear 50 great stories and then they hear one complaint about your team and your area and they think it's a mess. So it's managing perceptions. Managing perceptions down, in other words, the team you lead, managing perceptions up. Remember this phrase, perception is king. And with that I don't mean be false, be anything other than your true self. I believe in authenticity, but it's how people see you, especially your boss and the people you're trying to influence, and we'll touch on some of those roles. How do they view you? The other thing Annie needs to do, again, whether she's internal or external, is what is the current view from business or from her peers like development or architecture or elsewhere? What is their view on the testing team at the moment? If she was part of the team before she was promoted, she will most likely know. If you come from the outside, you might not have an idea. It's always good. Spend time with some of your key stakeholders in honest conversations with humility to say, I'm here to learn from you. Even though some of them will say things that's not right, or it's their opportunity to be full of ego and tell you what to do, humble yourself, go and find out what is the perception. The perception for testing, more often than not, is what? You're too slow, and you cost us a lot of money. Testing is almost like a grudge purchase. We all have insurance, life insurance, car insurance, or whatever. I would like not to spend that money on insurance, because I get nothing for it until something goes wrong, until my car is stolen. But I would prefer not to pay insurance. A lot of people see testing as insurance. We have to test because it's part of the SDLC and we must make sure the stuff works. But you know, if we build it right from the beginning, we don't have to test it there. And spending a lot of money, and look at that 26% I showed earlier, maybe in your organization it's 50%, who knows. But a lot of money is being spent on testing. And again, as we go through these bullshit layers to the top, that person on the top who owns the budget for you to do testing might have a perception that it's just a waste of time and a waste of money. So can you see that none of your technical skills, none of your tools and frameworks will answer that question? Then you need to go to those stakeholders or to your boss and say, how do you, or let's agree, how do we measure quality? What does that mean? To say, make things work is not a measurement. To say, make it work cheaper is not a measurement. To say, well, make it work faster, because how do you measure that? We have been successful when? So do you want me to bring down the costs of testing with 20% over the year? And is that realistic? Do you want us to increase our velocity? But then you are hostage to the greater IT organization. You can test as fast as you want. If the rest of the organization doesn't work well together, you will not have it in your power to increase the velocity and the speed of testing. Your boss might say something like, I've heard a rumor that your testers are all not skilled enough. No, that is something you can maybe measure. But then you have to spend some time with them. What are their skills level? What is their experience? How relevant is the experience to the actual work they're doing? Then you can maybe build on an as-is and to-be picture with some sort of a development plan. Okay, so Annie needs to move this big boss. Imagine yourself in her shoes. So I'm going to start with one of three sections. The first one is business management. Now, some of this might seem very trivial to you, very basic. Keep your testing hat on, but think of more than just testing. So why does a business exist? There's our little business. 5 of us decide we're going to start a business. We're going to start a new startup. It's exciting. Let's see, and there could be many right answers, but what is the reason to start a business? What is the primary reason to start a business? Anyone? Earn money? Okay, but what are you going to earn money from? How do you know you're going to earn money? You need to investigate the market, yeah. But what in the market is it that's going to make you think you can earn money? Research? Okay, look at this. There is demand. There's demand in the market for your product or your services. Now, there might be an incumbent company that you want to compete against and you think you can do it quicker. or it might be a demand that's not fulfilled by anyone at the moment, and it can be so many things. It could be an Uber kind of thing, Airbnb. It can be something very simple. But the reason to start a business is because there are people who want to buy what we have to sell. And if there are no people, if there's not a market for your services or your products, or a demand for what you need to do, then of course you're going to fail. Because why are they going to buy it from you? Sometimes clients don't know they need what you have to sell. Steve Jobs is very famous for saying this, and I'm going to paraphrase because I can't quite remember exactly how he said it, but he said, often our customers don't actually know what they want. We need to tell them what they want. Now that goes against lean startup principles and those kind of things. But I think both sides have an element of truth. But Steve Jobs was right, because at that time, who thought that I want all my music on my phone? And all the features that we're so used to now, they weren't there 15, 20 years ago. We wanted smaller phones. Remember the good old Nokia 6110s and those, you charge it once and it lasts you the whole week, but you could do very little on it. But the bottom line is, we start a business because there is a need for what we can do. Think of it in testing terms. What is the reason for the existence of your testing team? Think business now, because we know it exists to make sure there are no defects and make sure stuff works and all of that. In your client, if you're a vendor, or in the business, if you're part of a bank or whatever, there is a demand for what you do. So you need to make sure you understand what is that demand and align your business, this little factory, I call it in a later slide the engine room. You have to align it according to that demand. Because it's possible to build a business that is amazing, that doesn't fulfill the demand, and then you're not going to survive. You can build a business that MBA students will learn about one day, if you got it right. You might employ the most skilled, most amazing people. People might be super motivated. People might vote for your company as the best place to work ever. If you don't fulfill demand in the right way, you're going to close down. How do you fulfill demand? Through supply. So think of this picture, because I'm going to use this as a basis of a lot of what I'm going to say next. There's demand for a product or a service. I need to be able to supply it. There's demand for gold rings. I need to be able to open a mine to mine the gold. Or I need to partner with a mine that's mining the gold, and I'm going to actually refine the gold. Or I'm going to partner with somebody who makes the rings, and I've got a chain of retail stores where we're going to sell the rings. Or any business has this model. As a testing team in an organization, again, think of yourself as that little middle building. The reason you exist is there's demand for your services. But how do you fulfill that demand? And I'm going to touch on what those things mean. And then the other important thing is this, the end-to-end business process. As a leader of any team, and again, let's bring it back to what we do. Annie, you're the new head of testing. You have to understand end-to-end business processes. Maybe not in great detail. You don't have to be a process engineer. You don't have to have 55 pages of schematics. You have to understand the basics of it. So you're Annie now. Your boss has just appointed you. Where do I get my demand from? Who are these people? Which divisions do I work with? Which divisions in the bank? And I'm going to bring it back to a bank just to help me illustrate it. There might be divisions in the bank that don't want to work with me because they say in the past, you guys always screwed up our testing. So now we've just started our own testing teams. So pick your battles. The CIO or the execs might mandate that everyone in the organization use your testing services. But that normally doesn't work. Yes, they're told they have to, but they will still sneakily recruit their own testers on the market or use a vendor that nobody knows about. Sometimes it's somebody in the team's brother, sister's company that provides people or something like that, all right? So you might say of the 55 divisions in the bank that might need testing, only 3 really wants to work with me. Then that's where you start. Because now you have to build a reputation. Maybe you have to change a past reputation that's very relevant, but very negative. Because you just became head of testing, you joined from the outside, you have no idea what people think. And that's why I say one of the first things, if you were somebody like Annie, is spend time, firstly identify all the stakeholders, and spend time with them, and you have to do it quickly because you have to start delivering value quickly, and find out who are the people who want to work with you, who are the people who are against you, Who are the people who are ambivalent? In other words, they say, nah, we'll see. So I'm not against you, but you know what? We've tried this testing thing with that division so many times. It's always a mess. It costs us money. The defects come through production. We're not going to use you. So you have to, as a business-minded person in QA, find out where's my demand coming from. And then the very important thing is, how do I fulfill that demand? Think of people, process, technology. People will always do the work, no matter how much we go towards robotics and artificial intelligence and all those things. And those are relevant topics. But there will be people in your team who will do the work. Maybe right now the maturity level is low. It's maybe a lot of younger people, a lot of manual testing, for instance, or you could be inheriting a digital, amazing, exciting team that's already using machine learning and stuff. You don't know. You have to find out. And then you have to find out, is your supply, your current team, your current tools, testing tools, your current environment, your current vendors, are they suitable for current demand? But more than that, are they suitable for future demand? So that's another thing you need to find out. Right now, we're kind of testing most things and it's going okay. But you have to find out what is the IT strategy, the tech strategy of this organization. What will happen in a year from now that's different? Maybe they're busy digitizing a lot of their client services, where right now it's not digitized. Maybe they are on some sort of robotics process automation journey or AI journey, and they will need to have quality for that as well. Maybe they're expanding into different regions where you need to be able to employ people in that region. It could be 1,000 different things. So find out the picture when you get this job. Where are we right now? Who are the key stakeholders? What is my team like, skills-wise, relationships-wise, and so forth? What is our reputation? And build on some sort of a plan, something that you can show value, even if it's small value, very quickly. Because now you need to create momentum. One of my last slides is a book that I'm going to recommend. And a lot of what I've learned has come from that book. It's in order to have credibility as the new leader. You might not change the world. You might never change the world. You might get to a point where after 30 years of working there are still divisions that don't want to work with you. But you have to find some momentum, because perception is king. We will know we have been successful when. Because now the head of retail and business banking is speaking to the head of corporate and investment banking, and she says to him, you know what, these testing guys, they were really quite crap, but I don't know, this new leader, something has happened. People are motivated, actually getting stuff done, it's not costing me as much money. And through that reputation, not because it's mandated, because you know, any one of us, if somebody tells you you better do it, we will find a way of not doing it, okay? Through that reputation, through that momentum, more and more divisions in the company might want to come and work with you. You have reusable assets. It's quicker for you to do the work. You bring their costs down. Remember one of those first slides, the testing guy jumping up and the business guy sitting like that? What's important to the business guy? Okay, so remember this model. For any commercial organization to exist, there's a supply because there's a demand. Now let me quickly touch on funding model. You're head of testing. How is testing funded in the organization? For some organizations, it's just a cost. They know I've budgeted 10 million euros for the year, and you're the new head of testing, and your boss just say, just do your job within that budget. I don't care how you do it. Okay? Or you might be funded through projects, which in my experience is more often the case than not. So you maybe have some organic costs. Organic costs means things like tables and chairs, laptops, perhaps your testing environment, which is sometimes a huge expense, is an organic cost. In other words, it's what you need to get things done. So in the factory, the actual building and the electricity and the plumbing could be seen as organic costs. But the actual products we deliver is not, because I'm making it for 10 euros and I'm selling it for 15 euros. Now I need to get to a point where I need to try and make it for 9 euros and sell it for 15. Now there's a competitor, I need to sell it for 13. So I need, through efficiency and lean principles and sourcing cheaper but better products, all those things, I need to try and bring my costs down and deliver quicker. So find out what is that commercial situation you're getting yourself involved in. A big part of your KPIs, a big part of what you are measured on will be financial targets. Because remember, the bank you work for, the telco or whatever, yes, they want their stuff to work, but they also are all under pressure to drive down costs. So imagine you can show after a year or two that you've done both. more stuff works. In other words, there's less production issues and things like that. But you also brought your costs down. That'll be a great career advancement. How do we do that? Okay, so let's talk about demand a little. So you've got this new job now. Find out where's demand coming from. I've touched on this. It could be that the PMO, the project management office, or they call it Agile house, or they call it different things in different companies. It could mean that all testing demand comes from them, because they know what's happening in the various projects. So you need a key relationship with the leadership of the PMO. And you remember the end-to-end business process. Is Mr. PMO, how do I know there's demand? Do we talk about it over coffee? Is there actual system where you log it? Are there approvals? Can anyone just log testing demand? That's a big problem in organizations, in my experience. You just get a phone call, I need 5 testers and I need them tomorrow, can you help me? But there's no proper demand and supply management. And just because you have a problem, doesn't mean I have to drop all of these things to fulfill your problem, because the moment I'm trying to help you with 5 testers, 3 other people are calling me. And it's about managing that behavior. I cannot help you. Why not? Because we have a proper demand logging system. So, you know what I love to tell people, it's sometimes not good. Don't make your lack of planning my problem. And it's not because I don't want to help you. It's not because I've got 5 testers sitting here doing nothing and just because I'm not in the mood. I'm delivering on projects. I'm delivering to projects that went through the process, that has budget, that engaged with me months or weeks ahead of time. Now suddenly you realize, shucks, we didn't plan for testing, which happens a lot. I'm sure you've all seen that. Just as you're about to get going, you go, you know, like that movie Home Alone. I don't know if you remember it, where they forget their kid at home. There's something that we've forgotten. And right at the end they go, we need to test this. We need to make sure it works. Shit, we need testers. Who can we phone? Who can we phone? Then they phone every vendor in the world and everyone. And your brother's son is at home, you told me. He's just finished school. Bring him. Testing is easy. You know, and that's how they build these teams. And then it's a mess. Okay. So find out where does demand come from. And is there a proper process? In most very regulated environments like banks, there should be quite a stringent process. But sometimes it's not. Or even if there is a process, people bypass it. But you have to stand strong and say, I want to work with you, Mr. Retail Banking and Mr. Corporate Investment Banking and Mr. Business Banking or whatever. But we have to follow the process so I can better help you. The earlier you let me know you have demand, the better I can help you. And then also it's your job. Remember that little factory in the middle, because we are the QA and the testing experts. When people say, I want testers, what does that mean? What kind of testers? Why 5 and not 8? Why 5 and not 3? Well, I want automation guys, because this is a nice topic. I just want to automate all this stuff, because you know the guys from IBM or from Accenture or from Dell or wherever told me we just automate everything. Automation is quick and it's easy. We just use the tool. So see, it's that perception thing again. And then you have to say, Mr. Business Owner, it's not how it works. Because then you need to take their hand and guide them as what test assets do they have already. Normally it's in such a mess that you can't even start automating it. Then you have to help them through that maturity process. You do it as a colleague that wants to help them. It's in a collaborative way, but boundaries in this kind of a role is very important. When to say, no, I cannot help you. Or no, I cannot help you right now. Why? Because I don't have testers available. They're all on projects. Or I've spoken to a vendor, but we're still finalizing the contract, the master contract with them. They do have 5 guys in India that can help offshore, but I can't just use them because there's no commercial agreement in place just yet. Find out the source of your demand. I've spoken about the demand approval process. It doesn't have to be a stringent process, but just make sure that not just every man and his dog can come to you and say, we need testers. Because now they say, okay, I need 3 testers and I need them tomorrow. And a week later they go, no, the project is frozen, so you can take them back. They can sit on your bench and you pay their salaries. Thank you for playing with me. You know, so you have to remember the internal workings between you and business is also a commercial agreement. Is Mr. Business, do you want me to take all the risk? You've got a huge project. You need me to find 20 automation engineers. And you think the project's going to kick off in 2 months, but what if I get all these people and it kicks off in 6 months? What do we do with them and who carries that cost? So you need some sort of agreement about who's going to carry the risk for it. Can you see, as I'm speaking, It's got nothing to do with testing almost anymore. Think of that scale I showed you. It's all business, it's all commerce, it's all about carrying risk, it's all about what you measured on. The funding model, as I said, could it be organic? The company says, just you've got 10 million euros, use it. Or it could be that for every person on a project, you recover from the project. So you've got an internal time capturing system. Then you need to make sure, am I allowed to make profit? Normally you're not. But I worked for an organization where we were allowed to uplift our costs with 5% only, because we worked out that if we take our 400 or 500 testers and they're all recovering with a 5% uplift, it will fund our organic costs. So environments, our desks, our laptops, our admin staff, people, leadership, people who are not on projects. And you have to work that out. You might say, if I look at my staff who are not on projects, it costs me 5 million euros a year for their salaries, and I've got 200 or 300 testers on projects. What is that margin that we need to make in order not to be a cost to the bank? I need to be able to show to my boss that we funded ourselves. Yes, we didn't make a profit, but we funded ourselves through being deployed on projects. And then what's your agreement with the PMO and the projects? How do you navigate that? What do you do if they don't want to approve your timesheets? Now you can't recover those costs. At what stage do you tell the project manager, if you don't approve the last 3 months of timesheets, I'm going to pull my team off? And then there's all kinds of political battles about that. Okay. And then I mentioned the future view. Don't just be ready to fulfill current demand. You have to have a view of what's coming. What kind of major programs and initiatives? What kind of capacity do you need for that? I've got 12 minutes, so I'm going to have to rush now. Supply. What have you got to deliver the demand? And here I'm talking about capacity planning. If you have 200 testers in your team, do you have a scientific way of knowing on what projects are they? When are they rolling off? What skills do they have? In other words, simplistically putting it, a capacity plan is, I've got 200 testers, I've got their skills mapped, I've got their projects mapped, a new project pops up. And I need 5 automation engineers with Oracle experience, as an example, or with business banking experience. Who in my current team have those kind of skills, or have some of those skills, are employed at a rate that fits the budget here, and are rolling off projects in the near future that I can send there. You can't manage that through Excel. Maybe if you have a small team, it's tricky. There are systems, the PMO in your organization might have some sort of a system already, because they might manage this process on your behalf. But you have to be able to say, these are all the chess pieces I have, all the people, and this is the demand. Can I say yes or no? Or can I say yes, but not now? In other words, Mr. PMO or Mr. Project Manager, I actually can help you, but not next week, only in 3 weeks. Because I have a scientific model of managing what I have at the moment. Or I need to recruit more people because I don't have enough capacity, but recruitment can take 2 or 3 months. Because you need to find the candidate, you need to make an offer, which in some big banks and organizations takes 2 months because HR is so slow or whatever. And then that person needs to resign and give a month or a month and a half notice. So it might be 4 or 5 months before that person comes. By that time the project could be finished, or the timelines could be moved, or they found another job. Or you go to a vendor and say, I need 5 testers or 20 testers, and they must be onshore, they can't be offshore. No, I can't pay 200 euros an hour, I only have 180 euros an hour. Negotiating with them. Okay. Remember, your assets are part of your organic costs. Onboarding is an important thing. I don't know in the organizations where you work. Like I just said, you need 5 people. You might even know 5 people. You might even know 5 people you interviewed last week and you want to make them all offers. The internal processes can be so slow because now the bank might say, no, yeah, but you have to first advertise this job internally. You can't just go externally, and then that takes 2 months. All those. So think of when you get this job as head of testing, of all of these things that can go wrong. Don't let any of this blindside you. Don't let any of this come and surprise you. Because remember, your reputation is on the center of expertise. You can call it just the testing people, or whatever that thing, that home discipline. You might have testers that stay in your home discipline and you receive projects. Or you might have testers that you send out on projects because it's more of an agile DevOps kind of an environment. But ultimately, they come back. It could be that the project says, we'll manage the testing process, you just give us the people. Or it could be that we want the TCOE to actually manage the end-to-end testing. It can be so many different ways. And there's not one way an organization works. Different divisions can work in different ways. Find out how they work. All right. I'm talking about maturity and skills. This is one of your biggest challenges if you get this job like Annie does. What have you got at the moment? If you ask HR, they might not be able to answer you. People might not have had a review in a year or two. People might be desperately unhappy working there and no one knows it. You might have somebody who you think is quite junior, who is maybe the highest performing test automation engineer you can have, but he or she just never had an opportunity. So you can't just rely on what the previous boss said or what your team is saying. And it's difficult when you have a big team. You have to get to know your key people. You have to find out who are the bad ones that will bring in negativity and stuff that you might have to either mentor or get rid of. And now getting rid of is difficult because there are labor laws and there are unions involved and stuff, so you can't just let people go. How do you find a job for them somewhere else that you can get rid of them? How do you take these people who are maybe either junior or have been there forever, but no one's ever seen them because no one's paid attention and they can be the best person in your team? You have to invest. It's not a testing conversation, it's an interest in people conversation. And then just remember that arrow, the total process is, can you bring in lean principles? Most of you know lean or what it's about, but think of something like a handoff. I do something and I need to give it to you to do something and I need to give it to somebody else to do something. These handoffs is often where the delays are. So in your process, remember not your testing process, your business process, where are the gaps? Think of demand. How do I get demand? Is it a SharePoint site? How do I know that person is authorized to request testers? All the way through to, do I have capacity? Do I have people? Do I have to go to vendors? Do I need to recruit? All the way through to deploying them on the project, making sure we have reusable assets, managing the expectations. Are the testers doing okay? What are they struggling with that's out of their control? What are the handoffs? Try and automate that process. You know, something like, forget RPA, Microsoft Flow. I'm talking about like documents flowing or information flowing. Don't rely on emails. I'm sure we all in this room have way too many emails, and what happens is there are urgent things that you don't pay attention to. So think of, how do I work with business? How do I work with my vendors in a way that's automated, in a way that my team members are empowered to make some of their own decisions, to make sure that this central little engine room operates smoothly and as much automatically as possible. Now I'm going to have to rush through some of these. I've touched on this. Get a view of your current team. Remember your permanent staff? It's all about HR policies. Have you ever read an HR policy? You maybe have read your own, or you maybe read one when you started there, but now you've worked there for 8 years. Do you know what it says? Do you know what the highlights are? Do you know to what extent you can do disciplinary actions against your people? Do you know how the promotions work? Do you know how the job scales work? You're currently on a level 2, which means this salary scale. You want to promote somebody to that level, but they must have a degree to get there, for instance, or whatever. Make sure you know what it's about. Hopefully you have an HR business partner who is good. More often than not, unfortunately, you will not. I don't like HR people. So you have to find these documents, read it yourselves, you know, because you're going to make decisions on assumptions, and then it'll backfire because the labor law or the unions or whatever will be against you. Make sure you understand it. Make sure you understand the contracts. You might have 4 or 5 key vendors in your area. What does that master services agreement says? A big thing in those agreements is what we call non-solicitation, which means I cannot recruit somebody from the vendor for myself, or the vendor can't steal one of my people without written permission. That's a key thing in the contract, because otherwise, before you know it, your people are gone. They're stolen. People you invested time and money and training into. But the vendor also wants to protect themselves. They don't want the bank to just take my people. So we need to agree on this. So think of it. You've got a vendor person in your team. You're really keen to bring them on board. You can't just make them an offer. In fact, you can't even talk to them about it. Go to HR, find out what the labor law says. Find that master services agreement. And I can tell you now, again, my experience. If you go to the vendor management office or to legal and you say, please give me copies of all the vendor contracts in my area, you'll most likely not find it because we don't even know where it's saved. We don't even know where it is. Now you have to phone the vendor and say, I'm embarrassed, please send me a copy of our agreement so I can make sure what it's about. But understand what the labor law says and the agreements. Your future team, so you've now mapped where your team is at the moment, where the skills levels are. You've got a view of future demand that's going to come your way. Now you realize I most likely have don't have the right people in my team from a skills point of view. So now we have to look at redeployment or offboarding. We need to look at change management. We need to look at baselining their skills and either training them ourselves or getting an external vendor in, all those kind of things. And that redeployment and offboarding is where it's difficult when you're from the inside. You have to get rid of people that you know and are friends with. Capacity management and deployment. This is roughly based on the Spotify model, and I'm not going to go into detail here because of time. Find out how your organization works. Do you deploy people to a specific tribe or guild or chapter? You know, some of us use those words. Do you deploy them to a project and it becomes that project's responsibility to manage them? Do they stay your responsibility even though they're deployed to a project? How do you know what they've done here is similar to what they are going to do there? So rather than employing somebody else, I can actually just use this person there as well. It's a scientific way of managing it. In your bigger organization, so not only do you need to make sure you understand your team and what your boss wants, what is the bigger organization? Who is your HR business partner? Who's the head of legal? Who's the head of the vendor management office? Who looks after the unions and relationships with your workers? Map all of that out so you've got relationships with them. So when you phone them and ask for help, they know who you are. What's the principle? We like to work with people that we like. So don't phone HR one day and for a year you haven't even phoned them and say, hi, can I come and introduce yourself? Now they're going to go, who is this guy? Why must I help him? They know your face. They know who you are. They know why it's important to support you. So figure out who all those people are. Oh, just back one. Influencers and enemies. So there might be people who's got nothing to do with what you're doing, but they're influencers. So I might want to convince her about something, but we have no relationship, or she doesn't like me. But I know they're friends, and we're friends. So maybe I must convince him, because I know they're going to go play Tempen bowling some night, and he's going to tell her. So I need to map it out. It's almost like a chess game. So be smart about how you do these things. Almost done. This is a graph from Tricentis. I've used it often in my talks. It shows us the evolution of testing, quality. Classical testing, manual testing taking months and years, through to Agile, where it happens quicker, through to a DevOps, CI, CD, continuous testing kind of place, through to where we're going in the future. Some organizations are there already where we're using machine learning and cognition and artificial intelligence. Most organizations in the world are here. Most of the companies you work for are here. Manual testing, some automation, some sort of Agile, or we might call it Agile, but it's not Agile at all, proper Agile as it should be. Some of us in specific little areas are doing some continuous integration and continuous testing. It's very rare. So when you inherit this testing team, try and map them on something like this. Now, you can use something like CMMI or TMMI that I'll refer to just now. They're all just ways of helping you map this. This is where we are. This is where I need to go. This might be different for different organizations. So retail banking, you might have to have this approach. Business banking might say we're happy with manual testers. Another division say we are doing this already. If you can't send us testers that know what Dockers and Jenkins and all that kind of stuff is, don't even bother. You can't have one approach for every one of your stakeholders. You have to find that out. How do you do it? Go and introduce yourself, spend time with them, find out what's important to them. They need to look at you and say, this is the best thing since sliced bread because this person is helping me deliver quicker. TMMI, a lot of you will know what it is based on CMMI. I'm not going to do a lot here, but it's one of the ways to map it. When you walk into that team for the first day that you've now inherited, where about do they fall? Chaotic processes. A lot of us work here. There's not really always processes in place. There is a policy, there is some planning, there's a proper test organization. We can actually measure what we do. Now we're optimizing processes. Go and have a look at the TMMI website. Some testers don't like them. I think this is not the be-all and end-all. Is that my sign? Oh, it's outside. But I'm almost done. It's one of the ways to figure out where are you and where do you need to go. This is the book I wanted to show you. It's called The First 90 Days. It's about 2 or 3 year old book. And this is just from the table of contents. It's not a technical book, it's a business book. But what this book is about is when you get a new job, what are the things that you need to look out for? And I've mentioned some of them. One of the things that I learned from this book is find out what is important to your boss. That's the thing I mentioned earlier. Find out that what you are measured on is understood. So there's a lot of things you can, for instance, start doing before you even start that job, certain conversations, etc. So it's not a testing book, it's not a tech book. There are many books like this. This is one I can really recommend. Whether you are now in a new job or part of your ambition is to start in a new job. It's a great resource. Okay, so back to Annie. Now she's a superhero, okay? But she went through a lot in lifting that heavy box. So imagine everything I told you today, you can learn it in two ways. Either through experience, a lot of blood, sweat and tears, a lot of failure, or you can learn it, a lot of it, before. Imagine you just take some of the things I said to you today, like what's important to my boss, where's my demand coming from, who do I need to have relationships with, what's my vendor contract saying. Even if you just stick to that, you already have a step ahead. Otherwise, it's going to come blindside and hit you. You're going to negotiate something with a vendor, and then somebody's going to say, but the contract doesn't allow you to do that, and you've based your whole delivery on that agreement, as an example. So we can become like Annie, hopefully, and again, like I said earlier, your ambition might not be to become a leader or a head of testing or something. Even if your ambition is on that other side that I showed you, you want to stay in a technical role, which is legitimate, there's some of these business principles will serve you well if you understand what they're all about. Now we're almost done. I want to show where, I just want to see where he is, hang on. I want to show you Shrek quickly. Oh, it's not, it's a different Excel version. You remember, it's a pity it doesn't show you. Remember Donkey from Shrek? There's a scene where Shrek's talking to people and he's asking for a volunteer, and in the background, Donkey's jumping up and down. Pick me, pick me, pick me, and you can see his ears. So all I'm saying here toward the end is, hopefully you'll give me a lot of good smileys when you walk out. If not, it's also okay. If there's something you feel I can do different or better, remember we're always learning, please come and tell me. But we're basically done, and I think let's take 3 or 4 questions, and I'll be around and we can talk even more.
Hello, and thank you for the lecture. I have a question about Annie and why it's difficult for her to be head of the team when she was a part of the team, and about subordination and friendship inside of the team. How to organize the subordination when you were a part of the team and then you become the head of the team?
I think a lot of us have been through that or will be through that. So it's relevant. So if I understand your question right, is how do you practically do this? We were all now in a team, we were friends, we after work would go for a beer, I know what your partner's name is, I know your children and stuff, now suddenly I'm the boss. Now, I hope I can say this. So when you become the boss and you're a part of a team, don't become a dick, okay? Sorry for putting it like that, okay? Don't become arrogant or try and lord it over people, because you won't get cooperation. You know, there will be no respect. Even if you come from the outside and you do that, people will not respect you, because remember, respect is earned. You can't mandate respect. People will maybe smile and do things because they know their salaries and their jobs depend on you, and your good gracious and your goodwill. But we live in a world that's different to maybe our parents. We've got options. You can maybe go find another job. You can maybe give somebody the middle finger and say, screw you, I'm going to go work there. So I think if you become a leader of an existing team, is the balance of remaining their friend, still going with them for beers, having that close relationship, but also helping them understand that you've got a more difficult role now. And hopefully if you keep on managing them in a nice way, they will become almost like the generals in your army. They will have your back, they will protect you. But it's a lot dependent on the particular personalities and what the relationship was like. But I think it will always be difficult. But I think if as long as they can learn to respect you as their boss, because they will not respect you just because you're the boss. You know, I hope that answers, but you have to kind of figure it out depending on the situation.
Thank you.
Okay. Another question, guys?
Yeah, thank you for the great talk. And I have a question. You showed us the diagram and told that there is 2 ways of the development, going back to the high technical level and low management and vice versa. What I want to ask is there any possibility to increase the management skills and to keep up with the technology? Because in the nowadays we have to understand what we are managing, and if the boss is too old-fashioned, it may be really bad for the team. How to avoid the situation when the boss is outdated?
That's a good question. And I think it doesn't have to be an either-or. Okay, so whether you decide your ambition is, I am technical, I love doing technical stuff, I want to be a developer, people must just leave me alone, I'll write code, or I don't care too much about whether it's testing or BA or whatever, I actually want to manage people. It doesn't have to be exclusive. And that's an important question, because you can be here, you can be very technical and spend a lot of time on training to become even more technical. It doesn't mean you shouldn't grow in commercial knowledge. So now and then do a course on Udemy or LinkedIn that's not techie stuff. Maybe do a course on change management. Maybe do a course on body language or whatever, you know. Don't forget your technical skills when you're here, and that's your question. Because your team is getting smarter and smarter by the day. Yes, you spend a lot of your time on HR issues and recruiting and dealing with politics and stuff, but eventually your team will outgrow you because you're not keeping up to it. But now to get to your questions, what do you do, if I understand you right? You have a boss that's obviously pretty much just a manager or a leader, but they've been there for 10 or 15 years, and they're outdated when it comes to technology. I think do what you can. If they don't want to learn, then nothing that you do. I mean, you can send them emails, you can send them a Gartner study, you can invite them to a conference. If they don't give a shit, they're not going to learn. Okay. Hopefully, when you develop the right relationship with them and they don't see what you do as a threat to them, because remember, their emotional intelligence can be quite low, they can be an insecure person. If you approach them in the right way and they see that this person always comes up with great ideas and they're really actually helping me, I'm not threatened, then I think, but you have to find that particular person's sweet spot. That most leaders are very insecure people and narcissistic, in my opinion. There's a lot of studies that show the reason a lot of people become leaders is because they're fundamentally narcissistic. They don't give a shit about others, so they become leaders. There's a great book, I'm trying to think of the title now. It's a book written by a man, but it says, why are so many men horrible leaders? It's not exactly the title. It's a great book because he talks about testosterone and how men differ from women, and he talks about narcissism. So we've all seen that in our lives. Unfortunately, some people are there because of what tenure. So it means I'm the boss because I've just been here longer than the rest of you. That doesn't mean I've got leadership skills or I'm good at managing people. So it's difficult to work for somebody like that, you know. Hope it helps. Maybe one more question and then we'll be done. There's one here.
Hi, thank you for the speech. And I have one question about demand. Mm-hmm. So if there is no demand from business, they think that QA department is doing everything fine. Do I have to force my new ideas, like to push them for business, or it's a better way to suggest and making decisions together? What's the best way to do it?
It's a super good question. What do you do when there's no demand? Because it could be that testing is taken care of, or it could be that they don't want to work with you. There's a reason why they're not using you, okay? And you call it the push and pull principle. Is you can either push what you can do onto them, and this is true if you think of that supply and demand picture in any business that you are in. You can try and force your clients to buy a product. Or you can create pull, and they call that demand creation. Is how do you create, think of back to Steve Jobs and Apple or other examples. How do we create a desire in the client to want our product? How did Apple get to a point where when the first iPhone was released and all the subsequent ones, people were queuing for miles to get the phone? Because they've generated demand through marketing and, you know, the whole fear of losing out thing. I don't want you to have a cooler phone than me, so I'm going to want that new phone. And let's bring it back to what we're talking about. That's that collaboration and that's that working together. Don't assume that client, business banking, retail banking, or whoever, knows what you can help them with. Again, their understanding of testing could be very immature. You're the head of testing, so I'll phone you when I need some testers. They must just come and test. They must automate everything. That's typically what you get. Spend time with them and say, let's talk about quality. Let's talk about how I can help you earlier in the process. Maybe from an architectural point of view already, we can start looking at what is quality. Rather than performance testing at the end, can we do some performance engineering together so that at the end we can do it quicker and most likely cheaper? So it's that collaboration. They need to look at you and say, this is an important guy to keep his number on my phone. Some people will not work with you no matter what you do. But you, it's in your power to go out and build relationships. And just on that point quickly, guys, and I'm really done. A lot of us who are very technical people are not necessarily people. A lot of people, and it's okay, we've got different personalities, different strengths and weaknesses. But for some of us, it's easier and more natural to work in your little cubicle, to work in your silo, to work with other very technical people. But don't ask me to speak. Don't ask me to go to a meeting. Don't ask me to meet someone in business. And we have to learn, whatever your personality is, not to change your personality, because it will never change, but find areas where you can become better. Learn maybe how to do public speaking, not in a conference. Maybe it's just speaking to 3 people in business around coffee, because you have to learn to listen to what they say. There are tricks to all these things. Body language, their body language will show you they're shaking their heads, but they actually don't care. Or is their body language open? Sometimes we say, yes, I will do that, which, it's a Freudian mistake. But anyway, so the point is, build relationships, do what you can that's in your power, but that's where that momentum comes from. Because to theoretically say, we are really good at testing, we can help you, means nothing. But to say, the only people who worked with me is retail banking, you can speak to John, who's the head of retail banking, his costs are lower, we're delivering quicker, now maybe get 2 more divisions, that kind of thing. Guys, I hope, so this is at least a half-day thing, there's so much more to discuss. I hope it helped you a little bit. I hope to introduce a few topics that you didn't think of before. Thank you very much.
Johan, please choose the best question.
Favorite question? It's difficult, but I like that one the most.